Okay, so I believe we are recording at this moment. Yes, we are. All right. Welcome, everyone, to Food is Medicine. This is my online workshop / webinar that I'm here to share with you in hopes that I can teach you all a bunch of new information that will help you to be happier and healthier. So I'm going to, let's see, introduce myself. So my name is Cindy LeBlanc-Richard, and I live in New Brunswick, Canada with my husband, and it's actually a blizzard today. So today's a good day to do projects. But I grew up in New England, and I moved to New Brunswick, where my family is originally from, about 7 years ago. And I am a certified health and nutrition coach. I'm also finishing my diploma in holistic nutrition, which should be done within the next 6 weeks, I'm hoping. I've been working really hard at that. And I'm also a chef. So we have a small business. This doesn't seem to be clicking as fast as I'd like it to. Oh, I'm going backwards. That's why. Going backwards. Okay, there we go. So I'm also a chef. I have been a chef in the food industry, a food professional, not just chefing, but all things food service. I've been doing that for over 20 years now. So over 30 years. So I got my first job in a professional kitchen at the age of 13 when we were allowed to get work permits. So that's actually 32 years. Am I really that old? I guess I am. So, so food has always been a big part of my life, and my husband and I own a food business here that we've been running for a few years now, and we also are very highly active in the community with food classes and as well as the farmers markets. So food is a big part of our life and has always been a big part of mine. And I'm also a family food therapist. So I work really hard with friends, families, women, any type of person who wants to learn more about food, how it affects their body, and how they can use it to help themselves be happy and healthy. And so I have to share this with you. This is my disclaimer. I am not a licensed practitioner, physician, dietitian, nurse, or medical professional. This group document course is informational only. Anything you say, excuse me, I'm not reading you your rights. Anything you learn here is to be utilized, taught, shared at your own risk. If you are gaining information for your own health, client issues, issues, and you or they have a medical condition of any kind, you or they must maintain treatment as prescribed by a physician, regardless of my recommendations or advice, or any use of suggested online guides, supplementation, websites, products, etc. In the case of medical diagnosis, it is vital to work with a physician to determine the best course of action and to never replace one treatment for another that goes against a physician's advice. None of the recommendations, suggestions, or written information provided in this group, document, course, websites, pages, blog, or within communication, here or in messages, boards, forums, are intended to replace medical advice of any kind. The information presented is never intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Full medical clearance from a licensed physician should be obtained before beginning or modifying any diet or exercise plan or lifestyle program, and physicians should be informed of all food changes. So there we go. My goals for this training: to share with you what I have learned through my own life's journey with chronic illness, to provide the education for understanding the root cause of chronic illness and to realize the amazing control we can actually have over our own health, and to provide anyone help truly willing and committed to find their personal road to optimal health. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. I was a normal kid. I grew up in New England. My parents moved there to pursue work opportunities from French Canada. So they're about 500 miles south from where I am now. And both of my parents were working. It was the 70s, the early 70s, and convenience food was just becoming very popular. Both of the parents were working these days. It was hard to keep schedules. Your kids were busy, they were busy, so it became very common, and it was very highly propagandized and very popular way of eating. This was the new American dream. This was the new American way. This is how Americans ate. And we're no different here in Canada, though. We eat the same way. So North American diet, I should say. So we ate a lot of food that came out of a box, a can, a bottle, or a bag, right? And that became normal. And of course, our favorite fast food, fast food was becoming more and more popular. It was, again, the American way. McDonald's was definitely something that we loved. We loved going out for food. I did come from a family of farmers and fishermen, though, so we were, for what I thought, quite old school when it came to how we ate. And I felt that we were pretty homemade. But then again, with all the changes that were going on at the time, and working parents, etc., we partook in all of those traditions. So we would get our money and go down to the corner store and buy candy and pop, and I was no different than any other kid, right? And I hated vegetables. I mean, I would be sent to bed all the time for not eating my vegetables. So no different than children today. In fact, it's even more so. It's even more prevalent to eat this way, and even more normalized to eat this way. And so things started early for me when it came to symptoms. I definitely had ADD. Luckily for me, in the 70s and 80s, we were not overdiagnosed or, automatically put on medications for such things. I was just deemed to be a spirited child, and I'm so blessed for that. I didn't have to exist with that label, even though growing up and hearing it more and more later, it became aware to me, and even as an adult, I was slightly diagnosed with ADD, so it didn't surprise me at all. And migraine headache. So I had my first migraine headache my first migraine headache at the age of 7 years old. I will never forget it. It was excruciating. I didn't quite know what was happening. My parents were actually away on a vacation, just the two of them, and my sister and I were being watched by a family friend, parents, and other children. And it was quite scary, and I didn't want to tell anyone. It was kind of awkward having memories about it now, but my sister stayed with me the whole time, and I eventually had fallen asleep, and I didn't experience another one until much later, probably in my teens. But it was my first experience with a migraine headache, and it was quite memorable, I have to say. And allergies. So I remember always being in a doctor's office. I remember the skin prick tests and the blood tests, and I had an inhaler for allergy-induced asthma, and I often would get rashes when given medications. I was allergic to certain antibiotics, and if I had some type of affliction and was given a medication, I always had a reaction to the medication, and then I had to get another medication because of the reaction to the medication. And so that was very common for me. I was often allergic to synthetic products. I loved perfume. I would always get those perfume packs at Christmas time from family and friends, and I would sneeze my head off. My mother would follow me around the house and say, "You're allergic to that perfume." And I would say, "Oh, no, I'm not," because it's what she wanted to wear. It was popular. It was the one you saw on TV. It was the one that everybody else wanted. But I always had an issue with those kind of things, body creams, that type of stuff. And then at the age of 14, I wasn't diagnosed until the age of 25, but looking back after my diagnosis, I realized it started at the age of 14 with endometriosis. So pain from endometriosis and sharp shooting pains in the, that private area. And finally, through years and years and years and hormone therapy and different types of things, I was finally diagnosed by a specialist and proceeded to have some surgeries till 3 by the age of 40. And also that came with PCOS, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome, where my eggs would fill up with fluid instead of releasing normally and produce, they would burst after growing too large, and they would create a lot of pain during that process. And so I had been hospitalized for these situations. And then with all the hormones and such, I definitely had an issue with weight gain. I always felt like a 10-pound sausage in a 5-pound wrapper. I was always struggling with my weight. I was always exercising. I was always dieting. I was always in some kind of program, trying some kind of weight loss gimmick, trying the next thing. Weight has always been a constant thing in my life, so since I was young. And then anxiety. I definitely dealt with anxiety. I was an outgoing child, spirited, as my family would say, but dealt with fears. And this actually started happening later, but because when you're a kid, sometimes you have no fear, but these instances of feeling panicked or not being able to handle a situation, or not, my first instinct was not to want to go to do things like parties and that thing, and I would force myself to go, but that was definitely an issue for me. And that led also, and hand in hand really, with depression. I dealt with this for quite a few years in my 20s and 30s. And I was put on my first medication for depression in my early 20s. And, unfortunately, pills did not help me in any way, shape, or form. In fact, they tended to make the situation a little more unbearable for me. I would have crawly feelings, and just it made me more anxious than anything, I think. And then just the stigma of feeling as though I needed to be on a medication for how I felt made me feel worse. So it just seemed like a downward spiral when it came to that. And I experienced many, many chronic infections. I was always seemingly on antibiotics for one thing or another, whether it was a yeast infection or a urinary tract infection or a bronchial infection such as bronchitis, or strep throat. I would have that quite often, every couple of years. It just seemed that I was always getting sick, and that it was leading to infections, and that I was having to be put on some kind of antibiotic treatment. So that continued. The endometriosis and probably just the state of my chronic illnesses led me to be infertile. I had, again, various procedures to help me conceive, and unfortunately for me, that wasn't in the cards. So that was definitely something I struggled with for a very long time. And IBS, so irritable bowel syndrome. I always had diarrhea. I mean, always. It was 5-6 times a day. I always felt pressured. I always needed to be near a bathroom. I was always chewing on something to settle my stomach. And every time I would eat, it would definitely seem to coincide with what I was eating, but I didn't think that I was eating badly. So obviously I didn't think there was anything wrong. I just thought there was something I mean, I didn't think there was anything wrong with what I was eating. I just thought there was something wrong with me, not being able to handle food. And then eventually this led to joint pain, which was extremely scary for me when this started happening, because I am a chef. And the first joint pain that I started experiencing was in my thumb. So I use a knife to cut, and cut big things with big knives. And my thumb was almost, you don't realize how much you use your thumb in cooking and in the kitchen, but it's amazing when you don't have a thumb working well for you, how necessary it is. And it was excruciating. I would really feel paralyzed in my hand, and I would have to really push through it or have someone else cut things for me. And that was very, very scary for me, because I felt as though I was going to have to give up my career in the kitchen. And that had been something I had been doing all my life. It's all I knew at the time. And I couldn't imagine not being able to cook the way that I do. And it's a career that I enjoy and love. So that was quite scary. And then that led to, I was starting to have pain in my feet, underneath the pads of my feet, that you would categorize just by the specifics as maybe plantar fasciitis in the location that it was. And that was also very scary for me, walking and then all of a sudden feeling as though I couldn't walk, or I would have these shooting pains underneath the soles of my feet. And then also I started experiencing joint pain in my hips that would be categorized as bursitis for the way that I was describing my symptoms. And I just couldn't get over. I mean, I love to dance, and I do a lot of Zumba, and I've always worked out because I've always been trying to control my weight in that manner. And I really was very kind of freaked out about that. And I mean, this is all before the age of 40. So this is all happening, actually before the age of 38, 39 years old. So it was a little nerve-wracking for this to be happening. And then eczema, I started experiencing eczema for different reasons, and having reactions and dermatitis to certain products that I was using, and it seemed to be happening more and more often, and becoming uncontrollable, and doctors couldn't figure out what it was, where it was coming from, why it was happening, and they didn't know how to help me. And then, of course, chronic pain, which stemmed from the beginning, the age of 7 and 14, into all of my 20s and 30s, into my 40s, with the joint pain and chronic pain from endometriosis and migraine headaches and just chronic pain. So it had gotten to a point where I was just at a loss, really, as to how to help myself. Then I was told that I had antibodies against my thyroid, and that I was having an autoimmunity against my thyroid. So that was a little scary, because the thyroid is very important. It controls our metabolism. It controls some of our sensory things, and it's one of the biggest controllers in our hormone system and in our metabolic system. So that was scary. And I was told that it was very common for women, and I could take a pill for that, and it would never change, and I would have to take a pill for the rest of my life to control what was happening to my thyroid. Then the hypersensitivity to products and foods, and that resulted with the eczema and contact dermatitis, and just being itchy and not being able to use certain products, and buying a new face cream and putting it on and having my face blow up and not be able to see out of my eyes the next day. So it was quite scary. You start to really wonder what the heck is going on with yourself. And then weight loss resistance. So come to find out, through all of my studies and all of my experience and all of these changes that I've gone through in my life, weight loss resistance is actually a symptom. If you are doing your best to lose weight and you're gaining weight, then chances are you could have a possible physiological imbalance that is keeping your body from releasing that weight. And I feel as though that was my situation for quite a long time. And we just are taught that it's just easy, you eat less and move more and it'll come off. And unfortunately, it's really not that simple. So that was something I dealt with for years and years. And then finally, this was more recent. So at the beginning of my lifestyle detour process for myself, I was told that I was pre-diabetic. In fact, I was pretty much borderline diabetic. And I had an A1C of 6.5, and that was considered too high, and that anything higher I would be considered diabetic. So that was terrifying to me because this was not something that was in my family. I'm not predisposed to diabetes. I don't know of anyone in my family that has diabetes. I mean, I don't know the health circumstances of all of my family. I have many cousins and such. But as far as my heritage and my grandparents and my parents and my close family, no one has diabetes. So this was shocking to me and quite scary because I knew what all of that meant. So I received through my years many, many labels, but I never really ever got many answers. And I never felt as though my questions were even relevant to people who were listening. It was just the way that it was. I was always told that it was common and normal, and it's just how it is. And there's really nothing that I can do to change it. If I would ask about diet or lifestyle, they would say, well, this is just your genes. This is just genetics. This is how it goes. And we have a pill that we can give you if you need to work through that. And this even included opioids and narcotics. And so these are the things that really started to scare me. I, again, have been in the food industry for over 20 years. I have been a bartender. I have been a caterer. I have done parties and weddings and served many a bar, oh my. And I have seen many a drug addiction. I've seen many addiction in my life. And pills, in my opinion, besides some really nasty street drugs, pills have to be one of the worst addictions I've ever seen when it comes to people, their personalities, losing their life to the need of having these pills, and has also been a gateway to harder things when they find themselves in a position that they can no longer get them legally and have them be a part of their regular existence life when they start to take control. And this was not a way that I wanted to live or even be tempted to live. It was a very scary thought to me. And so I got to a point where I said, stop, I can't do this anymore. I had had enough of the doctors. I had had enough of all of it. And I made a decision. I decided to change my life completely, take an inventory of my life. I moved away from stressful things. I sold everything I owned. I really stripped it down and started over. I finally found some attentive medical support in the way of a naturopathic, more functional doctor who would listen to me and hear what I had to say and what I thought, and be told that I was not crazy and that I was on the right track. And I adopted a holistic lifestyle and spent the last 3 or so years looking just like this. And being a person in the food industry, being a professional in food for over 20 years, I really thought I had a good grasp of food. I was no longer eating out of bags and boxes as much. I thought I had good food habits. I thought I knew pretty much everything there was to know about carbohydrates and fats and how to regulate my own system. But I was very, very wrong. I was very wrong. So, but with all those changes, I was able to be free of chronic pain, and I am very, very blessed and lucky to be able to say that. So this is 5 years later, approximately, with 3 years of some very, very constant, committed changes, and I am no longer experiencing the pain that I was experiencing, and my migraines are much less, and I'm very, very grateful for all of that. I have managed to balance my hormones. My endometriosis has not been an issue for me. The flare-ups and the ovarian cysts and the issues with ovulation and what was starting to be hot flashes and maybe possibly some of the headaches that may have been related to my hormones have balanced out. I now sleep well, and I feel much better when it comes to that. My cycles are more on track, and etc. My digestive distress has alleviated. I have nice, pretty poops on a regular basis. No more diarrhea, which is just wonderful because that awful, yucky belly feeling that you get on a regular basis just kind of disturbs your day and is not enjoyable by any means, especially when it's chronic. And I am free of anxiety and depressive feelings. Now, much of that comes with having left a toxic life that I had, but it's also in choosing every day to not partake in a toxic life as well. And it also has to do with the physiological imbalances that I had experienced with all of my chronic illnesses. And it has a great effect, as we will see through this training, on how we feel. I'm also free of eczema, so that was really good. I was able to identify some triggers that I was having in my diet that was creating eczema, also coming to light a very, very toxic allergy to mold, and had been experiencing some mold in our home, which was causing the eczema, and some permanent sensitivities to mold-type foods. So that was really important to discover for me. Free of infections, I'm happy to say that I have not been on an antibiotic in over 7 years. So there is something to say to making these changes, for sure. And I have managed to reverse the antibodies against my thyroid. So my last test over a year's span, my antibodies against my thyroid have been lowered. So they're going in the right direction. I have reversed the autoimmunity against my thyroid. So that is super duper. I am thrilled, absolutely thrilled. So I've not had to go on medication. My thyroid damage has halted and been reversed. So that's exciting news. And I've also managed to balance my blood sugar. So I am no longer considered pre-diabetic. Again, over a year's span of blood work, I get my blood work done every May. And from May to May, I went from 6.5 on my A1C to 5.1, which is considered fabulous. So I couldn't be happier. And my doctor is just amazed by that, as am I. So what do I mean by holistic when I say holistic? I'm talking about the whole person. So characterized by the treatment of the whole person, taking into account all contributors to illness, including mental and social factors, rather than just the physical symptoms of a disease. So the whole person, how they're sleeping, what kind of relationships they have, what does their work environment look like, how stressed are you, what are you eating? Eating is definitely a big part of it. How are you treating yourself? How are you talking to yourself? These are all so important when it comes to our health. We don't realize that stress, of all things, can be such a big player in how our bodies manifest illness. And we'll talk more about that too. So what is the root cause of chronic illness? When I talk about chronic illness, I'm not talking about acute illness. So there is a difference. Acute illness is when, you cut yourself, or you're in a car accident, or you've had a heart attack. Now, technically, a heart attack is not an acute illness. It derives from heart disease, but the action itself of the heart attack is an acute incident. And so when something acute happens, definitely I want to go to the doctor, bring me to the hospital, right? Because when it comes to acute care and acute illness, our modern medicine practices are fabulous. Our doctors are well skilled, they're very intelligent, and they have diagnosis practices down, and they have some amazing science out there. And now with technology, with the heart transplants and the transplants and the research and the stem cells, and it's just amazing. Usually when you get sick and you have an acute illness, there's an incident, and from that incident you're either diagnosed, you're treated and you heal, and then it's over, right? When I'm talking about chronic illness, I'm talking about these diseases, these illnesses that won't go away. So 3 months or more, or something that happens seasonally, that happens every single year, that happens every 6 months, that reoccurs, is reoccurring, and doctors can't give you any reason for it other than it's common and it's chronic, and that you can take medication to alleviate your symptoms. So there's never any getting down to the nitty-gritty and getting rid of it. All right, so that's what we're talking about when we talk about chronic illness. And the cause of chronic illness is always inflammation. So what is inflammation? And again, there are 2 different types of inflammation. There is acute inflammation. So this gentleman was playing soccer apparently, or rugby, and he twisted his ankle, it appears. And so this would be an acute incident, and there would be a result of acute inflammation. And so in that instance, the immune system reacts because you have done something to your body, and then the defense system kicks in your immune system that is trying to protect the rest of your body from being damaged. It's trying to make sure that there's no other threats. And it's going to surround that damaged area with cells to inflame the area, to protect the area. And then it's going to kick into its repair system, which is the cells rejuvenating, getting rid of the damaged cells and creating new cells in order to repair the damaged tissue or what have you. So that is acute inflammation. Again, it happens, it's dealt with, it heals, it goes away. But we're talking about chronic inflammation. It's persistent, it's low-grade inflammation, and the immune responses for non-existing threats, meaning it's inflamed, but there's really no reason for the inflammation. It causes physiological imbalances, and it also causes negative gene expression for predisposed illnesses. So when we go to the doctors and we fill out our intake form, or we sit with the doctor and they're questioning us, they'll ask us about our family history and what our family history shows us for predispositions, predisposed illnesses, such as heart disease and diabetes, etc. So when we are experiencing chronic inflammation in the body, our body is kind of pushing along our DNA into negative gene expressions. So all of those genes from our family that shows up as heart disease or shows up as diabetes, high blood pressure, etc., are more expressed when there's chronic inflammation in the body. The other thing I want to say too about gene expression and predisposed illnesses is it's not necessarily just the DNA that we have inherited from our family that dictates these predisposed illnesses, but it's also the lifestyle habits that we have inherited from our families. So for instance, we all are raised we're taught to eat by our parents, who are taught to eat by their parents, and et cetera, and et cetera. So as families, we all tend to have the same types of habits, good or bad. We all tend to eat the same types of foods, good or bad. We might have the same lifestyle habits. We might, like beer because our father liked beer, or we might like sitting down every day and watching TV because that's how I did it with grandpa. But all of our habits, good or bad, tend to come from our upraising, and that's how we inherited our habits. Does that make sense? So these predisposed illnesses are all here for you to see. So we're talking everything from cardiovascular disease to irritable bowel syndrome to cancer, diabetes, pancreatitis, autoimmune diseases, which I have talked about a little bit already, arthritis, and renal disease. So we're going to go back, way back, to Hippocrates. So we're talking 370 BC. Hippocrates had a philosophy that all disease begins in the gut. And he pretty much had it right on. So we can rest assured that, agriculture and food and all of these things and pharmaceuticals, they've only been around for 100 years. People had to sustain themselves and be healthy. And there were smart people back then. And he was considered the father of Western medicine. And he really had it. He hit the nail on the head with this one. And it truly, truly is the case. So here's a schematic representation that I borrowed from Probiotic Digest and of a healthy gut versus a leaky gut. So on the left, you can see the healthy gut. Hopefully it's left for you. The healthy gut, the normal intestinal permeability, and this is our intestinal barrier. So these are our intestines. This is our gut. And you can see the pink here and how it's all sealed nice and shut, and it's nice and calmly colored, a nice light pink. And you've got these little finger-like projections on the top. Those are called villi. And those little finger-like projections are what sort through all of our food, and they sit in the microflora, the good microflora of our intestines, and they absorb all of the nutrients, the vitamins and the minerals that we need in order for our body to function. So these vitamins and minerals are being absorbed and sent throughout the body for the body to be able to do its job. All right, and you can see that it's nice and protected, and all of these particles, including microorganisms such as bacteria and pathogens and food particles, drugs, antibiotics, stress hormones, because our body digests hormones as well, and then toxins and chemicals and pesticides, which we experience every day in our lives in one way, shape, or form. Our intestinal lining is what protects our bloodstream from all of these particles, all of these microorganisms. Now on the right-hand side, as you can see, is a leaky gut. So you can see that it's red and inflamed. And when this continues to happen and we bombard our bodies with processed foods like refined sugars and chemicals and artificial flavors and colors and all of these crap things that are in our processed foods and in fast foods, and then the stress hormones and all the undesired things like pathogens and viruses, inflammatory things, inflammatory foods over and over and over again, it starts to wear a hole into our intestinal lining. And you can see this in the depiction. And once that happens, all of these pathogens and these undigested proteins and these hormones and these toxins are able to seep through, and now they're in our bloodstream. So they are now reacting, excuse me, my nose is itchy today. They're now reacting with our systems, and that is just not what we want to happen. So what happens when your gut is permeable? Well, the body starts to react, and it starts to produce antibodies, and those antibodies are produced in order to be the frontline defenders of your system now. And so they fight to the death. I mean, they're out there, choo choo, you're invaders, you're not supposed to be here. But the body can't keep up after time because we have not fixed the port of entry, right? We have all this talk now about creating the wall, not letting in the bad guys. I don't even want to go there, but it's just a funny little comparison. So we haven't fixed the wall. The wall is still open. It's letting in all the pathogens. It's letting in all the stress hormones and the viruses and the undigested proteins and all the yuck. And the body just can't keep up. And so the liver, which is our largest filtration system, it's the body's filtration system. It sorts through it filters our blood, it filters all those hormones, all the excess crap, the alcohol, the toxins, the asphalt, the exhaust, all of it. And it starts to work double time, but after time, the liver can't keep up either. And so the immune system awakens in a fury because it's no longer able to handle what is coming in. The liver is now chugging things back, and toxins and antibodies start to now affect healthy cells and organs. And all hell breaks loose. All right. So some symptoms of leaky gut would be digestive issues. That would be the most common, and it pretty much starts there. And that could be in the form of diarrhea or even constipation. So when speaking about constipation, let's put it into perspective. So now you have a leaky gut. Your intestinal barrier is permeable. There's holes in it. And all of these toxins and stuff are allowed to leak through into your bloodstream. And now you're not defecating properly. You're not letting out the waste. And so that waste is sitting now in your intestines for days in some cases. So your body is literally redigesting its own toxic waste. So imagine those circumstances are not positive, right? Then we deal with vitamin and mineral deficiencies. For a society that is as heavy as we are and overfed as we are actually the most malnourished society. And because of that, we deal with a lot of issues with cravings and wanting to eat. And that is because our body is literally malnourished. Regardless of how good you eat, too, now, when you have leaky gut, the vitamins and minerals that should be being absorbed into your gut lining are now just falling through and not being processed properly. They're not ending up in the right place or being used the way they should be. Eczema and dermatitis. So I spoke a little bit about that in my personal story. This is a very good sign that there are issues with leaky gut, because it's a pretty much telltale sign that your body is reacting to something in its bloodstream that it doesn't want to be there. And so it goes hand in hand. It's a very good first symptom knowledge. Hormone imbalances. So if you're dealing with PMS, if you're dealing with PCOS, if you're dealing with endometriosis, or perhaps you're older and you're starting to deal with menopausal symptoms and hot flashes and sleep issues and headaches, these can all be due to hormone imbalances, adrenal fatigue, and metabolic issues. This can all, high blood sugar, this is all based on your hormones. Food sensitivities and allergies. Again, if our gut is permeable and our body is not properly metabolizing the proteins and then getting rid of the waste, these undigested proteins are falling through into the bloodstream, and our body is now marking those as invaders. Our memory cells, after time, every time you eat these foods, your body has now recognized them as an invader and will continue to attack them. And so that is how food sensitivities and allergies start. Some of us and I am one of those examples, but I've heard of other people, friends and family, who have come to me and said, I ate lobster all my life, and now all of a sudden I'm afraid of anaphylactic shock. My lips swell up, and now I can't eat, I can't eat nuts anymore, or insert food here. But I've heard many, many times of people's experiences saying that they had become allergic to something that they never used to have an issue with before. So that's another good sign of leaky gut. And some of us just don't even know that these symptoms could be the result of a food issue. And then anxiety and depression. So we're going to talk a little bit more about how that comes into play with leaky gut and why it's such a big deal. Again, with the ADD, also chronic fatigue. This is something that a lot of people have an issue with. And this goes hand in hand with the physiological balances of your hormones and your body having less vitamins and minerals and being unable to properly produce energy. Again, joint pain. So when your body is attacking itself, it can choose various locations. And for many, many people, it's their joints. And again, that was part of my story as well. Chronic infections and diseases. So if these pathogens and these viruses have free reign and your immune system is not working properly and your liver is not detoxifying properly, well, then you are going to be susceptible to more infections. And if your body is not detoxifying properly and you're not able to rid yourself of infections, you might just be getting the same infection over and over again. It's never really leaving your body. It's just kind of circulating and making you sick again. And then autoimmune disease. So we've talked about that. That is when the body finally has just had it and the immune system starts attacking your healthy cells and your healthy organs. So autoimmune disease comes with many labels. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of names of autoimmune diseases. In cases of autoimmune system overactivity, the body attacks and damages its own tissues. And so that's considered autoimmune disease. And then autosystem disorders cause abnormally low activity or overactivity of the immune system. Immune deficiency decreases, excuse me, I wrote that word twice, the body's ability to fight invaders, causing a vulnerability to infections, which we just talked about. And so this happens too when we take too many pharmaceutical medications. And they don't even have to be pharmaceutical medications. They can be over-the-counter medications. They could be any various mixture of medications. And reasons like stress. These hinder the immune system, okay? And our immune system is our army in our body. But we keep killing our own army, basically, in the way that we live and the products that we choose to use. So before I go over this, I'm just going to remind you all again that I am not a doctor. This is just informative to give you a perspective of what autoimmune diseases are, because many people do deal with them, and perhaps you are one of them. I have been labeled with 2 of them. So celiac disease is considered an autoimmune disease that's very specific on the protein called gliadin. And gliadin is the protein that comes from certain grains that are considered glutinous grains or gluten. And those would include grains such as wheat, barley, and rye. And so this is a very specific reaction to that protein, and it happens in the intestines. And so it really causes an issue for people digesting food, and there are many, many people who have gluten issues. Rheumatoid arthritis, so that is the autoimmunity against your joints. Multiple sclerosis is an autoimmune disease that attacks the motor neurons in your brain that affect the way your body physically moves. So how your body is in control of its own motor function. Fibromyalgia, these are autoimmune attacks on the sensory receptors of your fingers. People say that they feel as though they have pain just touching things or when things touch them. So their extremities. And then lupus. Lupus is like the hodgepodge stew of autoimmune diseases. It can attack various organs. It could be organs, it could be joints, it could be skin, it could be eyes, it could be many different things. So lupus is a hodgepodge. You may be diagnosed with a few different autoimmune diseases like psoriasis or whatnot, and then maybe having issues with your organs, and then you might be diagnosed with lupus. Psoriasis is autoimmunity of the skin. So basically, the immune system causes an overstimulation of production of skin cells. So it's like the skin cells start to produce like crazy. And so it creates really thick, itchy, inflamed skin. And it also, with the overproduction, creates an overproduction of dying off cells. So a lot of flaking and a lot of itching. And so this is a very visual thing for a lot of people, and it's really terrible for the people who have issues with this and dealing with eczema to the point that they could have maybe called it psoriasis. I completely understand. It's excruciating, really. Graves and Hashimoto's, so that's autoimmunity against the thyroid. Graves would be considered hyperactivity or overactivity of the thyroid, and Hashimoto's disease would be considered underactive thyroid or hypothyroid, which is what I was experiencing, underactive. Vasculitis is autoimmune disease of the blood vessels. And then Crohn's disease and IBS is very similar to celiac disease, but not specific to the protein of gliadin. So this is just an autoimmunity reaction that is attacking your intestines and giving you digestive distress. And diabetes. So diabetes is autoimmune in the sense of type 1 diabetes, which the pancreas is no longer capable of producing the beta cells that create insulin, the hormone that regulates blood sugar in the sugar level of your blood. And it just cannot produce it anymore. It's been damaged in some way. Now, it could be damaged in the same way as type 2, but it tends to be kind of just a failure of the pancreas, and the person is now forced to take insulin in order to survive because the body needs insulin. So that's type A, and then type 1 and type 2 diabetes is definitely lifestyle related, and that is excess blood sugar, so high blood sugar, and your body is now becoming resistant to insulin. So the blood sugar level of your body is consistently high. Your pancreas starts producing insulin more and more and more. And insulin's job is basically, it's like an air traffic controller. So it's there to tell your body to A, use that sugar, glucose as energy, or to B, use that glucose and save it as energy, like adipose tissue, like fat. So it's either telling the body to burn it as energy or store it as fat. But after a while, when there's so much insulin in the body and the pancreas continues to produce insulin, the cells start to become ignorant to insulin. Like they don't hear it anymore. So insulin's there telling it where to go, and they're just flying by it like, no, don't see ya, I don't hear ya, I don't see you. And so you have an issue with high blood sugar, which becomes dangerous. So that is type 2 diabetes. And then here we're going to talk a little bit more about how all of these things, when it comes to leaky gut, also affect our brain. So there's a lot of discussion, a lot of study out there, and you can definitely dive into it. It's fascinating, fascinating information. But we have a gut-brain connection. So a lot of people say, feel it in your gut, feel it in your gut, go with your gut. It doesn't feel right. You sense something and you can feel it in your gut. That's because our gut and our brain are connected. All right. And even embryotically, they are formed from the same tissue in the beginning. And they also share microflora, which is good bacteria, and they send messages to each other. So the microflora in our gut creates about 90% of our immune system. It supports 90% of our immune system. And it also creates about 80% of the serotonin in our body. And the serotonin is that feel-good hormone that acts as a neurotransmitter in our brain. And so when we're depressed and we go and we are offered medication for our feelings, that's actually what they're trying to do. They're trying to promote the uptake of serotonin in your body. But the reality is when you have leaky gut, you're killing off this good microflora, and this good microflora is no longer supporting your immune system, and it is no longer producing these feel-good hormones, and it is no longer transferring the information between your gut and your brain properly, which is what allows your brain to have these nutrients for your brain to do all the wonderful things that it does, and which also controls your emotions and your functions and how you feel. And so basically, leaky gut equals leaky brain. So we're talking autism, we're talking ADD, we're talking chronic depression and anxiety, we're chronic, panic attacks, chronic migraine headaches, mental disorders, seizures, and Alzheimer's disease. So Alzheimer's disease is also, now there's a lot more research. You're welcome to look into that too. Perhaps we'll work more with each other. And Alzheimer's is considered now type 3 diabetes. So it's insulin resistance of the brain. So when you look at the gut and the brain connection, and you have leaky gut, and you have a blood-brain barrier in your brain that functions the exact same way as your intestines do, everything's leaking out of your brain, and it's affecting your bloodstream, it's affecting your emotions, it's affecting the way you function, it's affecting your memory, it's affecting your cognitive skills, it's causing inflammation in your brain. So all of these things come into play. So what causes leaky gut? Well, basically, it's the way we live. So the standard American diet and lifestyle. And there's a lot that goes with that. So just depicting this picture, looking at this picture, it's a white and brown diet. That's the standard American diet. It lacks of color, it lacks of vitamins, it lacks of nutrients, it lacks of all of those antioxidants and all the things that keep us young and vibrant and healthy. This is all inflammatory foods that you see here. So starting with the diet, we're talking about refined processed sugars, which is in everything now. So they'll have you think that you should be eating a low-fat diet. And basically, when they started stripping everything out of, stripping all the fat, now we need fat. We need fat in our bodies. We need fat in order to detoxify properly. We need fat in order to absorb certain nutrients. And they wanted us to believe that fat makes you fat, and fat is what causes the clogged arteries for heart disease. But actually, it's inflammation, and it's sugar that causes inflammation, insulin resistance, insulin issues, and hormone imbalances, and infections. So when they started pulling these, they got us to believe it. They started stripping fat out of all of our foods. I remember it. I used to work in a grocery store when I was a teenager, and everybody was buying, fat-free desserts, like boxes and boxes and boxes, thinking they could eat all of it. And they did, and we did, and I did. And when they started stripping the fat out of these things, they needed to replace it with something to make it taste good. So they just started loading everything up with sugar and sugar derivatives and artificial sugars, artificial flavors. So processed foods, that's where all that comes in. If it's more than one ingredient, there's a list of ingredients on the back of your box. I'm not saying that everything that comes out of a box or a can or a bag is bad for you. But you should be reading your ingredients. And if you can't pronounce the words, then good chances are you shouldn't be putting it in your body. You should recognize the ingredients that are on your labels. And to be safe, you really want to be eating whole foods. If it's more than one ingredient, then it's really not a whole food. MSG, which is also monosodium glutamate. This is an artificial flavor enhancer that is put in pretty much everything. So it's in all your restaurants, unless it's a natural food restaurant that you happen to be patroning. And it's in every box, it's in every can, it's in every bag, it's in every sauce, it's in every syrup. It's pretty much in everything. And it has been directly related in studies to migraine headaches and other cognitive problems. Preservatives. So there's preservatives in everything, and this is to keep the shelf life, right? A good example of this would be white bread or hamburger buns or hot dog buns. Bread should not be able to live for 15 straight days, and it can. So when you know you are eating something that you have owned for over a month and it hasn't turned moldy, good chances are you're eating quite a few preservatives that have kept that thing from rotting. Artificial colors. So many children and people in general have sensitivities to artificial colors, especially when it comes to brain health. This is something to be aware of. And we feed it to our kids like crazy. It's in candy, it's in cereals, it's in everything. It's in the soda pop, it's in the juices, it's in everything that we give to them, the fruit cups, you name it. GMOs. All right, so GMOs. Do we all know what GMOs are? Genetically modified organisms. So this was the brilliant idea of some chemical company people. Very large chemical company who's in charge of our food these days, begins with an M. They genetically modify our food. And so why did they start doing this? Well, first of all, to make them bigger, so they can manipulate genes to make things bigger, same as there are people with gene defaults or gene expression issues where they are bigger than normal, and then there are people who have gene problems. I can't think of the word the phrase I'm trying to come up with right now, but where they are smaller people, right? And these are problems, either genetic predispositions, issues with their DNA that have the gene expressions have caused them to have these problems in size. So scientists can do that with plants and with our food. And then the other thing that's really, really bad about genetically you're like, well, that's cool, it's bigger. But the big problem about GMO foods is the pesticide issue. So glyphosate, which was introduced in the 1970s, which is also in Roundup, which is now illegal around most of the world, but for some reason is still allowed to be produced with our food, is a pesticide that was being used to kill bugs on our crops. And what was happening was the bugs weren't dying, they were kind of adapting to these poisons and becoming superbugs. And so they started using more and more pesticides and herbicides on these crops, and it started to kill the plants. So what they're doing now is they literally take the seed, they take the DNA of these vegetables, these foods, and they have incorporated the glyphosate directly into the DNA, directly into the seed of these foods, so that when they spray the food with the glyphosate, with the pesticide, it will recognize it as not an intruder. And so the plant won't die. So now they can pile more and more pesticides on the crops in order to kill the crazy bugs that are starting to adapt. And so now we're getting quadruple, quintuple doses of not only the pesticides they're spraying, but we're actually eating it. We're actually ingesting it in the DNA of the food itself, of the apple, of the tomato, of the potato, you name it. The pesticide is directly in the DNA of that food. So that's terrifying. I don't know about you, but there's nothing good in that to me. And of course, with that comes the pesticides, the herbicides, and then there's plastics. So when we get a beautiful, humongo apple at the store, and it's nice and shiny, and there's not one little bruise on it, it's because it has been sprayed with a plastic solution that forms like a mold and a plastic around the fruit so that it keeps it looking pretty. And then the majority of people don't wash their vegetables, and they're eating this. So that's huge too. And then hormones, steroids, and antibiotics. And that comes to us in our food supply, in our meats. So the meat industry is very inhumane. They are kept in cages. They're very susceptible to illness and disease. So they are fed a diet full of hormones to get them to grow fatter faster. And then they're given steroid and antibiotics regularly in a drip to keep them from being sick. And so it's, and then they're fed a diet high in sugar in order for their insulin to be high, so that, and their stress levels are high. And so they're getting fatter and fatter. And so their fat percentage is actually higher as well. So the food we used to eat as hunters and gatherers was a lot leaner than the meats that we're eating these days. It's estimated that it was about 15% fat in the foods that we were eating back in the day, and now it's all the way up to 25 and 35% fat, because we like the fatty meat as a society. So they're raised that way on purpose. So it's really quite a grotesque, inhumane, and unhealthy industry. And those hormones, they affect our hormones. Those are excess hormones that we are ingesting. And then it moves right along to household products. So the things that we use in our house every day, like cleaning products and laundry products, all the sprays that we use, the bleaches, all the chemicals, those are loaded with chemicals. And then we wash our clothes with them. In fact, dryer sheets is one of the most toxic things out there. And then we go and we put that on our body, right? And our body is our largest organ. It's a detox organ. That's why eczema comes out in the first place, is if our liver is not functioning properly, the toxins are now coming out of our skin. And so it goes the opposite way too. What we put on our skin, we absorb into our bloodstream. So all of these products that we're using regularly, candles, so everything we breathe in, that also affects us. Air fresheners, we have a very famous one, begins with an F, we spray it on everything. So toxic. So now we're spreading it on our sheets, we're putting it on our couches, it's in our laundry detergents, it's in our cleaning products, it's on our mops, it's in our buckets, it's in our spray bottles, and we're touching it, we're breathing it, and it's ending up on our skin, and it's so very toxic. Cosmetics. Excuse me, I jumped there. Cosmetics is huge. So our children are starting to experiment with makeup when they're very young. I mean, I remember playing with makeup as young as 5, 6 years old. And these are filled with heavy metals. They're, the regular commercial products. And there's a lot of leeway in the companies, in the corporate business world of these products. They legally are protected. They don't have to tell us what's in these products. So what we don't know won't hurt us. And cosmetics have endocrine disruptors. They affect our hormones, and they play a big part in some of these issues of illness. Again, plastics. We use plastic in our home for everything. We put our food in it. We microwave in it. We store things in it. It's everything. We use it on our face. We buy plastic products. We wear plastic products. Plastic, we use it all the time. We drink out of it. drinking water out of it. We eat food out of plastic, all the storage, and we're polluting our planet with it, but we're also polluting our bodies with it. Skin creams and lotions, again, we're putting this on our skin, we're absorbing it into our bloodstream. This includes sunscreen, one of the most toxic things out there, surprisingly so, but true. And we lather ourselves up with this stuff, right? We're told to keep our skin moisturized, and yes, we should. But a lot of these things don't tell us what they're in them, and we don't know what's in them, and we use them anyway. Personal care products, again, that goes with everything that's in our shower, everything that's in our cabinets, everything that's in our bathroom. What's in your medicine cabinet, basically. And clothing. So now they're making clothing out of plastics. And not only does that pollute the planet, but again, we're putting it on our skin and we're absorbing this into our bloodstream. And EMF exposure. So this is huge now because it's everywhere. Everybody has wireless. And we're using laptops and phones at the same time. We're in offices and we've got things running and we got printers and that's wireless and this is wireless. And we've got smart TVs and even in restaurants, there's wireless in restaurants. So we're bombarded with EMF exposure. One thing that you can really do is you can shut off your wireless at night when you go to bed. Leave your phones in another room. Make sure that your room doesn't have any electronics in it. At least you're cutting at least half the exposure that you get, because we tend to sleep 6 to 9 hours per night. That's a great time to give your body a rest. It really has a great effect on our systems and our stresses. And pharmaceuticals. So prescription medications, over-the-counter medications such as pain relievers, we're really, really bad with that. Anti-allergy medications. And you say, yeah, I need it, but actually there are other methods out there. But the thing is we overuse these products. We are popping them like candy pretty much. And antibiotics. So the problem with antibiotics, yes, if we need antibiotics, we need antibiotics. If we have an infection, we need antibiotics. But we are overprescribed antibiotics. We use them for viruses. People get the flu and all of a sudden they're coming home with an antibiotic. Antibiotics don't help viruses. Actually, studies show that they really don't even help bacteria if your body's not willing to fight it. But, they are necessary at times. But what happens with the antibiotics is not only are you killing the bad bacteria that you don't want in your system, the stuff you're trying to kill off and that's causing infection, but you're also killing off all bacteria. So you're killing off the good bacteria, that good microflora that's in your gut and in your brain. You're killing that off at the same time. But the problem is we never turn around and then rejuvenate ourselves with good flora or good microflora, in probiotics and such. We just keep going and we eat the bad food and whatnot. And so that's like going into a flower garden and kind of cutting down all of your flowers and your weeds all at the same time. And they're annuals, right? So what happens if you do that and then you don't go back to it? The whole thing will grow back with weeds. And so that's pretty much what happens when we take antibiotics. Kind of wipe everything out. And then vaccines. So I'm not here to argue about whether or not you should take vaccines, but the things that are in vaccines do have an effect on our system and our immune system. And then there's environmental toxins. So heavy metals, we can find that all around. It was much more prevalent back in the days than it is now, but we can still find heavy metals all around. We use aluminum. We use things every day that we're exposed to. It's in makeups. Hi, puppy. Go lay down, baby. Asphalt. So there's a lot of people who work with these products that are around them all the time and are being poisoned basically by these things. Smoke, smog, air pollution, which is around us all the time. Asbestos. Asbestos isn't around as much as it used to be either, but people still are dealing with it in their homes, especially old buildings. Mold. So mold is definitely an issue for me. It's an issue for many, many people. And we don't even realize that there are many, many homes with water damage, people who are dealing with mold, and it becomes a toxin to the body. And then, of course, exhaust. So planes, trains, and automobiles and boats. It's everywhere. Lawnmowers. We're always exposed to exhaust. Intestinal inflammation. So pathogens, food particles, as we talked about, anything that we are dealing with in food allergies or sensitivities, undigested proteins, and parasites. So parasites is still very common, although we might not deal with it where we are here in North America, but if you travel at all, you can always be subjected to parasites. It's not uncommon. And so yeast and candida, so I talked a little bit about that, what happens when we take antibiotics and how we kind of wipe out our bacterial flora in our body. So again, we don't just wipe out the bad stuff, but we're wiping out the good stuff. And when we wipe out the good stuff and we don't reintroduce good microflora, good bacteria back into our body, the bad stuff just grows back, like in the garden, right? And that produces excess yeast and what is known as candida in the body, it's basically mold yeast overgrowth in your body. And if you have leaky gut, now that mold and yeast overgrowth is seeping into your bloodstream, and basically it's like having a moldy home, except it's your body. And so it starts to grow in your system and cause some really big issues and major symptoms. So this comes from antibiotic use, sugar. So an example I like to use is when you make bread and you're using yeast to make bread, what do? We put the yeast in warm water and then we put a little bit of sugar in it, right? Because sugar feeds yeast, right? And mold also feeds mold. And yeast itself, so high yeast diet, anything like alcohol, wine, beer, bread, anything very yeasty, brewer's yeast, can cause issues when you have candida. Another huge point is stress. In fact, stress is probably, for some people and in many cases, a bigger deal than diet. I know this affected my life for a very, very long time and probably had a big part to play in my illnesses for a while. Not that my diet was ever perfect, but chronic stress, such as constant worry. So the reason why I want to stress something about stress. So there is good stress and there is bad stress. The good stress that we deal with is our regular day, right? We get up in the morning, our cortisol comes up with the sun, and that's our stress hormone. That's our body's natural stress hormone. And that's our get up and go, right? Good stress is, we have a job to get to. We have a deadline today. We got to get the kids to school. We've got practice at 7. Get up and go. Let's go. That's good stress. And then at the end of the day, you come home, you wind down. It gets dark. You calm down. Your melatonin kicks in. You get sleepy. You go to sleep, right? That's your regular day when it comes to a body's normal reaction to stress. But what I'm talking about is chronic stress. And your body doesn't know the difference. Another way of stress would be like if a bear was running after you or a lion, your body would absolutely go into a normal reaction of stress. It would produce adrenaline hormone, and it would give you this instant ability to run away from that bear or that lion. And then hopefully the lion goes away or the bear goes away, or you just kind of scared yourself and there wasn't really anything there, and you kind of laugh about it and you calm down and your body relaxes and it goes back to normal, right? That's stress. But with chronic stress, it's ongoing. But your body doesn't know the difference of whether or not it's a bear or a lion or just an asshole boyfriend or girlfriend, right? It doesn't know that having a fight with your boss or being so freaked out because you can't pay your bills this month or whatever the situation may be, your body still thinks that it's running from a bear. And the problem with that is after a long period of stress, your body goes into fatigue because your body can no longer produce the hormones, kind of like your body starting to ignore insulin. Well, your body starts to produce stress hormone on a constant basis. And when your body does that, it literally shuts down your digestive system. Because in the case of acute stress, where you need to run from a bear, your body is literally stopping everything else that is not necessary at the moment from functioning, including your digestive system. It's like, we don't need to do those jobs right now because she needs all of her energy to run away from this bear. But yet it's telling your body that all the time because you're in this crappy job, or you're in this crappy relationship, or you're constantly worrying, or you're angry and you won't let go of something, right? Your body still sees that as a bear. And so your body's not functioning properly. That causes excess stress hormones, that causes excess insulin in your body, so it raises your blood pressure, and then it raises your blood pressure. So then you're dealing with inflammation just from stress. So stress alone can have a major, major impact on the physiological balance of your body, your homeostasis. And so it's very, very important to pay attention to stress. As a holistic practitioner, I concentrate as much on stress as I do on food because it's that important. So some of those things would be constant worry, toxic relationships, toxic work environments, sleep deprivation. Sleep is our rest and digest time. So if we're working in the middle of the night, or we're not sleeping at all, and we're still thinking about that toxic relationship, and we're still thinking about that toxic job, and our body is still freaking out, and we're not sleeping, our body is not doing the custodial duties that it needs to do at night. And that is what happens when we sleep. It's the rest and digest. Our digestive system starts doing its job, and our cells rejuvenate themselves. So sleep is huge. And trauma. There are people who are dealing with past traumas, who are ill, and who have tried everything under the sun to get better. But because they have never dealt with these traumas, they've never dealt with the root cause of their illness, really. And these are things that are deep-seated and often ignored. And when they're left to be and left to fester in your body, they will turn into something else. They will manifest into illness. So it's quite a cycle, and it in turn suppresses your immune system. So all of these things just shut your digestive system down. Again, what did we say? 90% of your immune system is supported by the good flora in your gut. And so if your digestive system is shut down because of stress, then your immune system is shut down as well. And so you are no longer able to fight off illness, viruses, pathogens, disease, and your cells are not dying off properly. They're not being removed, or they might be allowed to manifest into something else as abnormal cells. And abnormal cells can turn into cancer. So we're leaving our body susceptible to disease. So why don't we know this? That's the big question, right? Well, to be at the defense of the doctors in the conventional system, because they don't know. They are not taught this. The conventional system is funded by large pharmaceutical companies, including the medical schools. Doctors are specifically taught a curriculum to diagnose and treat symptoms. So they do their intake and their evaluations based on symptoms and complaints. Their job is to sort through those symptoms and complaints and use the modern medicine practices of testing, which are wonderful, by the way. That is the good part of conventional medicine, to diagnose illnesses, basically to put a label on it. And then these labels are then compared to a list of pharmaceutical medications, because they're heavily educated in the use of pharmaceuticals. Much of their education is based on pharmacology. And basically, they take the list name of this particular disease, they go to a book, and they find what pharmaceuticals are, what pharmaceuticals are used to deal with those symptoms, to mask those symptoms, to alleviate the symptoms. But again, I keep saying symptom. Remember, it's not the root cause. So they're never dealing with the root cause. So doctors in general get about 20 hours of nutritional training, which is about a weekend course, plus their their pathology, their symptomology, A&P, all of those wonderful things. They're very educated in the body, but unfortunately, they're never taught nutrition. And for a symptom that runs specifically on fats, carbohydrates, and proteins, you would think they would get more education than they do, but it's basically set up that way. And no specialty deals with another specialty. So they're kind of segregated. And it's done that by design for business, right? These are still business people. These are people that are there to make money. Yes, we put them on a pedestal. Yes, they have an ability to help us when we're not feeling well in the means of diagnosis and testing. But unfortunately, when it comes to chronic illness, they only are able to use what they have in their briefcase, right? Which is diagnoses and pharmaceuticals. And unfortunately, that never gets down to the root cause. And so they're just not educated in the way of nutrition. And the only real education for the nutrition they get is because people can be nutrient deficient, and tests will show them that, and they can give them supplementation in those nutrients. But again, those nutrients are made by pharmaceutical companies, and they're often synthetic. They're not whole foods based nutrients. So either way, it's working out for them. They don't really need to know too much. The other thing is there are certain nutrients that work against pharmaceuticals, so they need to be aware of what nutrients do that. So many cases, people who need to have more vitamin K in order to thin their blood because they have issues with blood coagulation or blood clotting, is they'll put them on a blood thinner, but then they'll tell them not to eat green vegetables because green vegetables contain vitamin K, and vitamin K and a blood thinner could thin the blood too much, and that's dangerous. So that's really basically the only nutritional education that a doctor gets, unless they continue on beyond their medical degree from the conventional practice and move on to naturopathy, functional medicine, integrative medicine. Those are the words you want to be looking at. Those are the people that will work functionally with the use of pharmaceuticals in the way that they are well used, and root cause integrative practices for underlying issues such as the root cause of illness, right? So it's really not their fault, and it's by design. So it's by design that it's like this. So it's many years ago, the pharmaceutical companies managed to buy their way into the medical schools. So they basically write the curriculum for the medical schools, and they also have lobbied their way into the government laws to protect themselves. So they've made it so that it's illegal for anyone else to treat. Again, I'm not a doctor. I'm not saying I'm able to treat you. But it's illegal for anyone to try to treat someone for a disease because they've protected themselves in that manner. Pharmacology is the only legal way to treat certain diseases, right? When it comes to disease. They basically patent the pills, and they've patented the names of the diseases. The disease names belong to these entities. And they put it everywhere, and they market it to you. So you see it everywhere. It's a way of life, and it's done that way by design. They're not there to not make money. Let's just put it that way. So that's what we are. We're just basically dollar signs. We are walking dollar signs. And, there are billions of people in the world. This business model is working wonderfully for them. And so this is what I like to call the sick care business model. And it's really genius when you think about it. It's absolutely ingenious. So they'll market the products to the masses, whether that be food, processed food, food in a bag, snacks, pharmaceuticals, makeup, you name it, right? We'll just market it to the masses, billions and billions of people, especially with the internet now and TV, and everybody's glued to it. It's easier than pie. And then convince them that they need it and they want it. And we do. We want it all. Get them addicted to eating our food and buying our products. They've definitely succeeded with that. Get the laws to protect us. Convince them that chronic illness is all in the luck of your genes, right? It's all in your genes. You can't do anything to fix it. And then sell them a dream of a manufactured cure in the way of a pill or a vaccine. Then get them to buy insurance so they have the money they need to give us for when they do get sick. And then every generation will equal more money because they will be just as habitual, because they will be trained by their family to live the same way. And then we may end up in the future that we fear the most. And even when we end up in this room and in this bed, they'll continue to take our money there too, or the money of our family. So let's talk about 4 steps to healing leaky gut and reducing inflammation. So first, we need to remove the crap. If you don't remove yourself from the toxic way that you're living, then nothing's going to change. So you could reintroduce anything new and it's not going to help. Same as if I'm in a moldy building, I am going to be sick. And if I try to do 10 different things to make myself feel better, it won't make a difference if I don't remove myself from the mold, right? From what is making me sick. So in this case, for many of us, it's removing things from our life that are affecting us, whether that be food, whether that be the situations that we're in, etc. For the most part, a lot of it is food for many of us. But stress, again, and all of the other things we talked about are all part of that. And this is just a reminder for myself, I'm going to be giving away a free pantry makeover guide. So this is an exercise you can do in your home. It's really easy. It's about 5 pages, and it's going to walk you through an exercise to go through your cabinets and your refrigerators and really take a look at the products that you have in your home, and it's going to help you identify what foods and products are safe to keep and use and what ones are not so safe to use and that you may want to think of replacing with more natural options. So I'm going to link that at the bottom of this training, and you can download that and use that in your home. You can do it with your family. The next step is to reseal, and that's to give ourselves wonderful nutrients full of color, vitamins and minerals, and give our body a break from the removal. So removal is about 50%, you're about 50% there. And just doing that alone allows your body to heal and reseal its gut lining, and then filling it with all good foods, rich, whole foods, high fiber, full of color, full of nutrients and vitamins and minerals, and that will help along. And then to rebuild that good microflora in the way of probiotic foods and probiotics, perhaps some supplementation if needed, and really giving the chance for your body to rebuild its powerhouse, its immune system, its good feel-good hormones, getting back into rebalance and restoring. So restoring confidence, restoring health, restoring maybe your sense of community, maybe restoring, your sense of power over your health, which we all have. So it's really not just restoring your gut, but restoring your peace, your happiness, and looking forward to a future of health and happiness, which we all deserve. And so this happens from education, preparation, and action. And without these steps, we just can't be successful. Same as me doing this webinar, or writing a book, or executing a recipe, or learning something new, a new language. First, we need to be educated. We need to know what we're talking about. We need to know what we're doing. We need to know what we need to have in order to be successful. The products, the machinery, the equipment, the knowledge, the know-how, and then preparing, coming up with a plan of execution, how we're going to do it, how we're going to make it work for ourselves, and then finally putting into action, which is always the scariest and hardest part, and the upkeep, what I call the practice. It's a practice every day, right? And that's what I do. This is what I'm here for. I help with all of these three phases, especially the education. Once you have the education, I help you to prepare and to get ready for these changes, because nothing can happen overnight. Whenever we jump the gun, we always fall flat on our face. At least I know I do, right? So it's time for a detour. It's time to turn things around, and we're capable of doing that. We absolutely are. And so if you don't mind, I would like to tell you a little bit more about the services that I offer and how we can work together to help you take that detour, to make that lifestyle detour for yourself and your family, for your health. So I offer one-on-one personalized coaching, and this includes an extensive intake form. This thing is about 18 pages long, and we cover everything from, your favorite things to do, your activities, the food you eat, to your spirituality and the things you enjoy. And we really get a rounded, well-rounded vision of what's happening in your life and how to go about dissecting it and finding something that works for you. Then I offer education and guidance through personal health issues and goals. I want to know what your issues are and what your goals are and how I can help you achieve those. And I offer support for successful doctor's appointments. So if that's something that you are having an issue with, whether your doctors aren't listening to you, or you feel inferior to them, or you don't know what questions to ask or what tests to ask for, I'm there to help you sort through all of that information that sometimes can be so overwhelming and get you to that attentive medical support that you need. And then we devise together a personalized lifestyle plan that you can execute and go forward with for the rest of your life, so that you can really pinpoint what works for you, because everyone is different. This is available as a one-time consult, which is a 1-hour consult. And some people really, really enjoy that. This is for people who are go-getters and they love taking on things on their own. All they need is that education and a plan, and they can take off. And so that's really great and found to be very affordable for a lot of people. I also offer 3-month and 6-month coaching programs for individuals, couples, and families. So this is for people who really feel as though they need that support. They need that connection in order to keep them going, because sometimes we all need that extra support. And this is available for anyone that it's available as the one-time consult. So I do a one-time consult, and then it's a half-hour twice a month, and unlimited email access to me, plus my private Facebook group where there's a wonderful bunch of women there doing the same thing, right? Consistently doing their practice towards their optimal health. And I call it a practice because it really is. It's an everyday thing. And then just to let you know, I do this a couple times a year. Perhaps if you're watching this, the dates may be different when you click on the connection, but my next 6-week lifestyle detour coaching program is starting February 21st, going through March 28th. So that's on Thursday evenings. So this is a live program that is in a virtual classroom on Zoom. And when you sign up, you get a link, and we meet every Thursday live, and we go through everything that we could ever think of. So this is a general program. It is not a personalized program. It's a general program, but we hit everything. So if you're dealing with hormone issues, or maybe it's blood sugar, we hit hormones, we hit brain health. Perhaps you're trying to support not just yourself, but your family. This is so informative. This information could work for you personally, for your current situation, for your future situation, for your children, for your older parents, for your elderly family. So we really go from A to Z when it comes to this. This is basically turning your life around in a compressed course. So I've taken 6 months of coaching and compressed it into 6 weeks of information. And we do a live Q&A session at the end of each Thursday session. So it's really, really full, jam-packed of information and very interactive. There are worksheets and workbooks and videos that go along with it, as well as reading recommendations and video links, and you name it. It's definitely worth the investment. So in this 6-week program, you will learn how to identify food sensitivities that can be causing your symptoms and pain, what foods to eat every day to feel your best and eliminate frustrating, sometimes debilitating symptoms, how to use powerful and natural solutions to eliminate dangerous toxins from your life and your home that negatively affect your health and the health of your family. Some tips and tricks to reducing stress and balancing hormones, which often negatively affect our best efforts to lose weight. It's the hormones. Not to mention its massive effect on our emotions. How to balance blood sugar for heart and brain health. What routine steps and habits to take to reduce inflammation and help your body reverse chronic illness and build a stronger immunity. And you will be getting, with the program, you get 6 live online interactive meetings with me, Cindy. And these meetings are informative, and they guide you through each week to help you be accountable, to gain knowledge, and to know what action steps you need to take to help to move forward. And you'll have a chance to map out your week to meet your expectations and progress. You'll get my Whole Foods guide with tons of educational and informational links for you to learn even more about gluten, autoimmunity, and the best scientifically proven eating styles for optimal health. A 30-day transformation guide with detailed guidelines to help reboot and refresh your eating and lifestyle habits. This is a great way to cleanse and start new with better habits and to move forward to optimal health through holistic living, all at a pace that works best for you. I'm actually going to turn on the light. There. Not that that helped very much. It's starting to get dark. 30-day meal plan consisting of meals, snacks, smoothie recipes. We also do a lot of that in our group. We share recipes. A recipe guide filled with great recipes, including desserts. Shopping guides and video links showing exactly how to find and what what you're looking for in the grocery stores, right? It's so hard when someone gives you an ingredient or a suggestion. Where do I get that? I wouldn't even know where to find half of these things. So I help you through all of that. Thyroid guide full of information and educational links to help you through the confusing realities of thyroid disease today. This education will allow you to be your best health advocate when speaking with your medical team in order to make the best decisions that are good for you. And our private Facebook group, Happy, Healthy, and Holistic. This is where I continue to share videos, insights, tips, and tricks. It's a great place to share your experiences with fantastic people who are steadily working towards their own path to health and happiness just like you. So here you can ask questions and be part of an understanding community. And so the training never ends. Some things to consider when you're considering these programs is that only 30% of people who actually learn this information will truly commit to the process of securing their health. Your body can completely repair itself, damage cells, and rejuvenate new cells in 120 days. Our bodies are amazing healing factories if we allow them to be, if we treat them well. They really are. You know, some of our organs can completely rejuvenate themselves after time. You know, some are 120 days, some are a few months, some are a few years. But if you allow your body and to do its job, and if you treat it well and you really commit to yourself, you can have a whole new body in, you know, a year, a few months. Food allergens, when found, that's the trick, in moderation is not a reality. So it's very imperative to identify food sensitivities and know that your body, your body doesn't like these foods, right? And it's never going to change. So I know, because I'm allergic to dairy and I was in denial for about a year and I was completely miserable. And it can take up to 6 months for an inflammatory response of a food intolerance to subside. So if you are continuing to eat foods that your body doesn't like and is sensitive to, you will continue to produce inflammation. And so a 6-month inflammatory response is only if you eat it one time. Imagine if you're continuously eating this food that your body is sensitive to. You're consistently driving inflammation in your body and you're not even aware of it. And if you consistently focus on the matter of health rather than the magical expectation of something else like beauty or vanity or success, you will be successful in achieving optimal health and happiness. You have to use your education and focus on health. When you're healthy, when your body's healthy, the rest falls into place. Okay? And investing in your health is the best investment you will ever make. So you're either going to pay for your health now and learn what you need to learn in order to secure your healthy future, or you're going to pay later, right? And that's really the truth. So I want to thank you for watching this webinar, this training. Definitely check the links below for the Lifestyle Detour course and to my website, which is www.thehippiekitchen.com. There's contact information there. You can reach me anytime, as well as sign-up information for the 6-week Lifestyle Detour course for whenever that might be when you're seeing this video. And as well, I'm going to link below the download for the Pantry Makeover Guide, which will help you go through your cabinets, go through your kitchen, and really find out the truth hiding behind your food. And so I hope you enjoyed this training. I hope you got a lot of wonderful, wonderful insight and information and education out of this. And I hope to see you soon. If you want to work with me, definitely just shoot me a message. And I'm looking forward to I'm looking forward to talking to you soon. Thanks so much. Have a good day. Bye-bye.